Um, so I work as an economist for a consulting company named Highland Economics, and we specialize in agricultural economics, among other things. And our job in this project was to work with the Organic Seed Alliance to try and create a way for growers to capture their costs and their returns that they're making on their organic seed production, and also a way to analyze that, to summarize it in a way that would be useful to them and also useful to the Organic Seed Alliance to better understand the economics of organic seed production. So the tool that we developed is based in Microsoft Excel. I'm going to take you through that here in a bit. And so this allows them to save those records of their production costs and returns, and also to email that file easily. So when a grower opens up the tool, this is the first screen that they come to. You'll see it's pretty simple and limited. One of our goals in this was to make it as easy as possible for growers to use this tool. So kind of a stepwise progress to capture all the relevant information and to make that as clear as possible and as easy for them, because accounting for your own production costs is a complicated thing to begin with. Just writing them down and keeping track of them can be a challenge. We didn't want to make that any harder. We wanted to simplify that, so hopefully we accomplished that. And the way we tried to is with user forms. So throughout this tool, growers will fill out 3 user forms and 1 optional one, which I'll show you. And this first one is just capturing some basic information about the operation. And I should say that these capture costs for just one crop. So if a grower wanted to track multiple crops, they would just save a new version in another file for that crop. And today I'm just going to take you through a fake example of a hypothetical farm. Some of you who are familiar with these operations are going to realize that I'm not putting in realistic values for some of these, but I just want to show you how it works. So I'm going to model a butternut squash operation. On 2 acres on a farm that's a total of 10 acres. And we're going to say that we produce squash seed from this operation, and we get $5 a pound. The grower has the option to add 3 different products on the same crop. If they're making money off of more than one product, they can add up to 3 of those. And we're going to say that land costs are $50 per acre, and we pay machine operators $20 per hour, other labor $15. And the general farm overhead rate is just a way that we try and capture the portion of the costs that go to just general overhead costs. And if they have questions, if a user has questions about it, they can click on the question mark and get help. And same with the retail overhead costs. They don't have to fill that information out. But for our example, we're just going to do 5% of variable costs go to general overhead. And once they hit submit, you'll see that all the information they provided is recorded in these blue cells, and it will get used later in some of the summary tables that come up. You'll also notice that once they hit submit, the next tab opens up for them and they can go on to the next user form. So again, trying to make this a stepwise process that's pretty intuitive to use. And this form is for the equipment costs. Any equipment that's used in production will get input into this form, and it will help them understand how those equipment costs factor in. So I'm going to fill out information for 4 pieces of equipment. We'll do a tractor first with a list price of $5,000. You'll see that the equipment speed has already been filled in. Wherever possible, we tried to include either generic values, average values to help the user out, make it quick for them. And we'll say this is 4 feet wide, that we use it 25 hours a year. It runs on diesel, 25 horse, and diesel costs $3.55 per gallon. They also have the option to add an interest rate if they took out a loan on the piece of equipment, and that will help estimate those interest costs, but that's optional. Once they hit submit, the form automatically pops back up, but clears, so they can quickly add the next piece of equipment, which I'll add a bed sled or a shaper. Let's say that's $1,500. Again, the speed has been automatically included, and you'll see that some of the fields in here have been labeled not applicable because they don't apply to an implement fuel type. So again, trying to make it intuitive, simple, and fast wherever we can. We'll add a piece of post-harvest equipment, a gravity table, and we'll say we use that 10 hours per year. It's electric, and electricity costs 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And then lastly, we're going to add irrigation equipment, some drip irrigation. And in this case, all the fields are labeled not applicable because the tool automatically calculates the costs of irrigation equipment. So once they've added all the pieces of equipment that they want to, they hit I'm done. And again, you can see the information that they provided is recorded in the cells in blue. They could change this information if they wanted to, and everything will update accordingly. And down here in red is where the tool has done its work automatically to estimate the costs. In the top portion, we have the operating costs, which are fuel, oil, repair costs. And then down below, the ownership costs, which include depreciation, interest, and insurance costs. And those will get used in later summary tables as well. And once again, after they've submitted that information, the next tab opens up, and this is the final form that they have to fill out, which is the activities form. This is designed to capture all those activities associated with production and also any inputs that they put into production. You'll see at the top of the form, you can include information for biennial crops. So split up your activities between what happens in year 1 versus what happens in year 2. But in our case, we'll just do a single year crop. And I'll add in a few activities here. So they're kind of broken down into when they happen, general, planting, harvest, and then categories. We're going to add in some bed shaping, and that's going to take some machine operator hours. We ask for the dates that these activities typically happen, and that information will get used later on in a way that I think is really useful. We'll say that happens on 1 acre, and it requires some mulch. Say 500 feet at 2 cents. For each activity, a user can input up to 4 inputs associated with that activity just by clicking this button, and then they can use more than one. Next, I'm going to include some land preparation activities. Some hand weeding, and that's going to take 20 hours of other labor, not machine. That will go from July 1st through harvest time, and that'll happen on 50 feet of 4-foot bed, and will not require any inputs. Next, I'll model some harvest activities. We'll do a hand harvest or butternut squash. Let's say that takes 16 hours. the end of October. And this will have two inputs. Oh, sorry, no, will not. There. And once they've input all the activities they'd like to, again, the information that they provided is recorded, and they can change it afterwards if they'd like to. Each activity is represented by one row, and we have the labor hours, the dates, the area that that activity is affecting, and then each input associated with that activity. A grower has the option also of estimating their greenhouse heating costs. Oh, thanks. I apologize if you can't hear me. It's a little difficult to lean into the mic while typing. But this is useful for estimating greenhouse heating costs if a grower has one. It's based on the weather patterns in the local cities. In this case, we only have cities for Montana. You can just add dimensions of the structure, the material the walls are made out of, a general measurement of how much it leaks, and what percentage of and then how do you heat it? Is it a constant temperature? Is it a day or night switch between them? And then what temperature you keep it at. And after you hit estimate the heating costs, you can see that for what I've entered, it's about $16 per year for those 2 weeks of heating. So that can be useful too. Again, you'll notice that after hitting submit, actually submitting the activities form, again, this one is optional, but after they submit all their activities, you have 5 summary tabs open up that take all the information they've provided and put them into tables that can be useful. So I'll take you through each of those. The first one is the timeline, and this is why we have them enter the dates, is for this summary. So again, each activity that they input is represented by a row here. And then in these columns, you have the months of the year split up into 4 weeks. So we can see pretty quickly when our activities are happening. In this case, bed shaping and greenhouse heating are taking place at the last half of May. We have some hand weeding that's going on during from July to October. And then you also have the costs associated with that activity, which include both the inputs and the labor costs off to the side. So this is a useful way of summarizing that information over time, over the course of a year, when activities are happening. This next tab summarizes the costs in a bit different way. It takes all the information from the equipment tab and combines it with the information from the activities tab and shows you how those costs are broken down. So again, each activity is a row here. And then we have the tractor and equipment costs, as well as the labor and the input costs, and then an estimate of the total cost from that activity, combining those equipment with the labor and inputs. And then we have an estimate of the total cost for the entire operation, what this is costing us. And remember that our operation is comprised of 2 acres. This next tab takes that same information but converts all of the costs to a per acre basis. So this is much more interesting for comparing different operations and also understanding how scaling might work. So on a per acre basis, this operation costs about $700 per acre. These next 2 tabs combine the information from the cost tabs and also bring in income and give us a net revenue for the operation. This is something that is much more typical format for a crop enterprise budget. You'll see that the cost categories are structured a little bit differently, but it's a great, succinct kind of summary of where both costs and revenues are coming from. So you can quickly see that labor is by far our largest cost, and after that it's diesel fuel. The variable expenses, the ones that will tend to vary depending on the level of production, and then down below the fixed expenses that tend to stay the same regardless of production level. So this is the net revenues we're making on our 2-acre operation are about $1,300, $1,400. And this next tab converts that into a per acre basis again. So you'll see that our 2-acre operation basically gets divided in half, and we're making about $700 per acre on this hypothetical operation. So after the grower's done inputting all this information, they get these great summary tables at the end. They can save it for their own use, refer back to it in later years, compare it to the information that they record in later years, or in our case, they can send it on to the Organic Seed Alliance, and we get to look at that information and try and draw some conclusions, some more general conclusions about organic seed economics. So I think that concludes my explanation of the tool. I think I got about 5 minutes here to take some questions if anyone has some questions about how this works. Or
Great. And if you want to ask questions, please come to the mic to ask your question, or wave at me and I'll hand it to you.
I know in Carl's case, he does several different seed crops. Can you enter several different operations into the same, so that all of the different operations that you're doing are you get your price per acre for different seed crops? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. Unfortunately, no. This doesn't have the capability of doing more than one crop. It would be neat to add some function that could compile from different crops.
All the same questions,
Huh.
you know, but so there's your butternut, and then you've got your carrot, and then you've got your onion, but these end ones pull all three things together.
Huh. Yeah. I would have to give that some thought, how to make it work. But yeah, that's a good idea. It'd be great to be able to compile that into a single file rather than having multiple files. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion.
So Winston has created this from scratch with some programming in Excel, but we have started engaging in conversations about what if we were able to take a tool like this and put it online in a way that when you entered your data online, there was a way to capture all the seed producers' data collectively and then have a metadata set of what's the average yield, what's the average cost, what is the average price point or whatever. So, but that's a wish list that is easier for those of us who wish a lot to think about. We'll keep exploring options.
Yeah.
Any last questions, or shall we shift? There will be time at the end for a little discussion with our panelists. I'm going to have each of them present for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll collect all of you back together to have a little bit more across-the-board discussion. Sound good?